The firm has a fantastic history, having been founded in 1926. And Andy was, in my estimation anyway, the true founder of the firm. He was probably the most brilliant man I ever met, a true Renaissance scholar. He had an expertise in so many different areas, but also a great individual who I think guided the firm through its most important formative years and established a foundation that we benefit as lawyers today.
Andy really was the architect of the mutual fund department of the securities group at Stradley and had a really close relationship with Jack Bogle, who was really the personification of the Vanguard group. And so as I learned that Andy had actually participated in the hearings on the 40 Act and was the actual individual lawyer who had drafted the registration statement for the Wellington Fund, I realized that we had working with us really an icon in the mutual fund industry.
Well, I've worked with a lot of Stradley attorneys in my day. Andy was, of course, the prime one, and he was not only the counsel for Wellington Management Company, owned by Mr. Morgan then, but also the counsel for Wellington Fund. But he was smart, he was sharp, he was a good human being, and a pillar of integrity. I mean, you tell me what else you need in a mentor.
The Delaware group we actually started to represent in the 1930s. So Andy Young was a social friend of a gentleman named Admiral Linton Nelson, and the two of them were friends with another gentleman named Walter Morgan. Walter Morgan had hired Stradley Ronon, and Andy Young in particular, back in the 20s to create the Wellington Fund. And Admiral Nelson decided that he wanted the same pooled vehicle that he had seen Andy Young create for Walter Morgan. And we continue to represent the Delaware Funds and Delaware Management Company some 80 years later.
There are records going back to 1940 of an exchange between the industry and the regulator as to how certain laws should apply. And time after time, I saw numerous letters from various lawyers at Stradley Ronon to the staff.
Well, our practice in the Midwest started early on. In the 1940s, there was a fund organization called the Babson Funds, which Stradley created and represented for many, many years. That organization was acquired over time through insurance company acquisitions. But the roots of that fund group still remain to this day. There are a number of clients that operate out of Kansas City, Milwaukee, and Minneapolis that have their earliest roots with the Babson Funds.
Stradley was one of a handful of firms that had a substantial investment management mutual fund practice. Stu Young, who was, I think, one of the lead Stradley Ronon attorneys in the investment company area, and he had a way of dealing with people in the government that was particularly effective.
Jack Bogle's importance in the industry, in my opinion, was bigger than life. I think he brought the fund industry to the point that it now is because of his leadership. The ownership by the funds of the service provider was the most novel thing. It has not happened since.
The creation of Vanguard Group was unprecedented. Nobody ever saw anything like it. And then Philip Fina, who became a good friend of mine, a tremendous lawyer, very hard worker, who did all the work to get Vanguard documented to create a new kind of investment company. And this was a huge job. It had never been done before, precedent-breaking. He also helped later on, only a couple of years later, we decided to start the first index fund.
The mutual fund industry in the 80s really just sort of exploded. We were very fortunate to have major players that were our clients for decades. And so we were able to participate with those clients in a lot of really cutting edge work in the 80s that formed the basis for even more growth in the industry in the 90s and beyond.
One of the most interesting was Vanguard formed what has come to be called a fund of funds. It took literally years to get it through the SEC. Ultimately, we prevailed at the SEC. I think the vote at the commission was only 3-2.
So we created Star Fund. You're trying to think of things you can do differently than anybody else, ideas you've had that no one has tried before. And this was a pale shadow would become a pale shadow of the whole index thing. We were constantly doing this, mostly on impulse, no market research. Let's just do it and see if people will buy it.
There were many developments within the industry, including funds with multiple classes, funds that used sub-advisors, funds of funds, funds with different fee structures, and funds with complicated investment techniques. And all of those developments required our practice group to respond appropriately.
From 1994 till about 2005, we grew from about 9 attorneys to somewhere around 38, 40 attorneys. So it was a tremendous amount of growth. In the late 90s, we decided to open up an office in Washington, D.C., largely because we were experiencing so much growth. And in Washington, there's a great pool of talent in the mutual fund industry.
We're one practice group, and the division is one of space, but sometimes the distinction isn't really felt because it's as if they're down the hall from us.
During the economic crisis, the industry faced a number of very significant obstacles. And again, we had the opportunity to help solve some of the problems that the industry was facing during that time. 2 examples of that were the obtaining of a no-action letter to create a global credit facility. In addition, we obtained a no-action letter from the SEC to permit funds to purchase securities that were issued by the Term Asset-Backed Loan Facility.
It was really a sea change in regulation. There was this entirely new regulator, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, or the CFTC. This affected the swaps activities that were very critical to our clients' investment operations. To our surprise and delight, our practice became more than just something that we used for our existing clients. It really became a go-to practice that new clients came to us for.
The American Bar Association established a task force to study the use of derivatives by registered investment companies. And a group of us got together and collected our thoughts on the many different ways in which the use of derivatives was not adequately addressed under the Investment Company Act of 1940. And we were able to prepare a paper, and that served the basis in large part for a concept release that the SEC issued to comply properly with the Investment Company Act.
When I started at the SEC in 1997, there were probably about 20 ETFs with maybe $8 billion in assets under management. By the time I left in 2011, there were more than 1,000 ETFs with approximately $1 trillion in assets under management. So during that 14-year period, it was a time of tremendous growth in the investment management industry relating to ETFs. When I started at Stradley in 2011, Stradley already had a couple of well-established exchange-traded fund clients. And so I could really hit the ground running with the other Stradley attorneys in providing services to those existing clients. And one of the projects that I've worked on since coming to Stradley has related to the exchange-traded managed funds product, which is a product that's kind of a hybrid between the mutual fund and the ETF. And the legal work necessary to bring that type of product to fruition is really the most cutting-edge legal work in my practice area of exchange-traded products.
By and large, I think the mutual fund industry is in pretty good shape.
I think we will just see more and more regulation, more and more regulators, and the need for firms like ours that have a commitment to spending a lot of resources and time stepping up to learn these new regulations and help our clients adapt.
Indexing is going to grow and grow and grow. That's my prediction. And you come back and see me, all of you, 15 years from now, and I will accept your congratulations for such an accurate projection.
I'm excited about the prospects for our practice group and the fund industry going forward. We've developed expertise and attracted top practitioners in the area of open-end mutual funds, closed-end funds, exchange-traded funds, private funds, and all the different areas of legal expertise required to service those types of clients.
As the partnership has changed and grown, the commitment of the individuals who comprise that partnership has allowed it to exist today and continue to be a leading voice in the investment management area in particular.
It's wonderful to think about all the past history of Wellington and Vanguard and Stradley Ronon. I, for one, believe strongly that when one has a good partner, outside firm, providing legal services in this case, one tries to preserve and protect and defend that relationship.
The department continues to grow, literally on a national and international basis, continues to add incredible talent. It's a department that has a tremendous future and adds to the future of the firm in very, very meaningful ways.
The growth and strength of Stradley Ronon's nationally renowned investment management practice is the direct result of the confidence that our industry-leading clients have had in us for over 80 years. We welcome the opportunity to continue to grow with our clients into the future.